Have you ever walked into a room and suddenly forgotten why you went there? Or maybe you've been talking with a friend and found yourself struggling to remember a familiar name. The face is clear in your mind. You know exactly who the person is, but the name simply refuses to appear. A few hours later, it suddenly comes back. If you're over 50, experiences like these can feel unsettling. Many people quietly wonder, is this normal? Is something wrong with my brain? Could this be the beginning of serious memory problems? These concerns are incredibly common. In fact, one of the biggest fears many adults have after 50 is the fear of losing their memory. Because memory feels deeply connected to who we are, our experiences, our relationships, our identity. When recalling names, words, or recent events starts becoming harder, it can feel personal. But here's something important to understand. Not every memory change after 50 is a sign of cognitive decline. In many cases, your brain is dealing with something far more common and often far more manageable. Today, we're going to explore why names, words, and memories sometimes become harder to recall after 50, what's happening inside the aging brain, and what signs deserve attention. And by the end of this video, you may see these frustrating memory lapses in a very different way. Your brain is still working, just differently. One of the biggest misconceptions about aging is the belief that the brain simply starts shutting down after a certain age. But that's not what research shows. The brain remains active throughout life. It continues adapting, continues learning, continues forming new connections. However, some processes become less efficient. Think of your brain like a massive library. When you're younger, finding a specific book can feel almost instantaneous. As you get older, the library doesn't disappear. In fact, it often becomes larger because you've accumulated decades of knowledge and experiences. But locating a specific book may take a little longer. The information is still there. The retrieval process simply becomes slower. This is why many adults over 50 experience what experts call tip of the tongue moments. You know the word. You know the name. You know the memory exists, but accessing it becomes temporarily difficult. Then, sometimes minutes later, or even hours later, it suddenly appears. This is very different from forgetting the information entirely, and understanding that distinction is crucial. Why names are often the first thing to slip. Many people notice a pattern. Names become harder to recall than other types of information. And there's a fascinating reason for this. Names are actually one of the most difficult forms of memory for the brain to retrieve. Unlike a word that has meaning attached to it, a name is often an arbitrary label. For example, if someone says doctor, your brain instantly connects it to hospitals, patients, medicine, and countless associations. But a person's name doesn't always have those built-in connections. The brain has fewer retrieval pathways available. As a result, names become especially vulnerable to age-related retrieval slowdowns. This is why you might remember everything about someone, where you met them, what they do for work, stories you've shared, yet still struggle to recall their name. It's frustrating, but it's also remarkably common. The hidden impact of mental fatigue. Many adults assume every memory problem is caused by aging. But aging isn't always the primary culprit. Mental fatigue often plays a much larger role. Think about modern life. Constant notifications, news updates, emails, financial concerns, family responsibilities, health worries. An endless stream of information competing for your attention. Your brain wasn't designed to process this level of non-stop stimulation. Over time, mental overload can make memory retrieval less efficient. It's not necessarily that the memory is gone. It's that your brain is exhausted. Imagine trying to locate a specific file on a cluttered desk. The file exists, but finding it becomes harder because everything around it is competing for attention. Many adults over 50 are carrying far more mental stress than they realize, and that stress can significantly affect memory performance. Sleep problems can make memory feel worse. One of the most overlooked causes of memory issues after 50 is poor sleep. Even people who spend enough hours in bed may not be getting restorative sleep. As we age, sleep often becomes lighter and more fragmented. Many people wake up multiple times during the night without realizing how much it's affecting their brain. Sleep plays a critical role in memory consolidation. This is the process where the brain organizes and stores information gathered during the day. When sleep quality declines, memory retrieval often declines too. You may notice forgetting conversations, losing track of thoughts, difficulty recalling words, feeling mentally foggy in the morning. Many people assume these changes are simply aging, but sometimes the real issue is chronic sleep disruption, and improving sleep quality can lead to surprisingly noticeable improvements in mental clarity. Stress changes how memory works. Stress doesn't just affect your mood, it affects your memory. When stress hormones remain elevated for long periods, the brain shifts into a survival-oriented state. Survival mode, memory retrieval becomes less efficient. Your brain prioritizes immediate concerns, potential threats, problems that need solving. This leaves fewer resources available for recalling names, words, and details. Have you ever forgotten someone's name during an important conversation, then remembered it immediately afterward? That's a classic example. Stress temporarily interfered with retrieval. The information wasn't lost. Access to it was simply blocked. Chronic stress can create these interruptions more frequently, and many adults over 50 experience ongoing stress without fully recognizing its effects. The role of brain fog. Another common factor is brain fog. Brain fog isn't a medical diagnosis. It's a description of how many people feel when their thinking becomes less clear. Symptoms often include difficulty concentrating, mental sluggishness, forgetfulness, trouble finding words, losing your train of thought. Brain fog can be influenced by many factors: poor sleep, stress, dehydration, blood sugar fluctuations, physical inactivity, certain medications, nutritional deficiencies. When brain fog develops gradually, people often assume it's simply part of aging. But in many cases, underlying lifestyle factors are contributing significantly. What is usually considered normal aging? This is the question many people want answered. What memory changes are generally considered normal? Occasionally forgetting names, needing more time to recall information, misplacing items from time to time, walking into a room and forgetting your purpose briefly, having occasional tip-of-the-tongue moments. These experiences become more common with age. However, the key detail is that the information usually returns. You eventually remember. You retrace your steps. You recover the missing word. The brain is slower, not necessarily failing. That's an important distinction. When memory changes deserve attention, while many memory changes are normal, some signs should not be ignored. Examples may include frequently repeating the same questions, getting lost in familiar places, difficulty following familiar routines, consistent confusion about time or location, major changes in judgment or decision-making, forgetting important information repeatedly, increasing difficulty managing daily responsibilities. These patterns go beyond occasional forgetfulness. They may warrant discussion with a healthcare professional. The goal isn't panic, the goal is awareness, because early evaluation can provide clarity and reassurance. Why physical activity helps memory. One of the most powerful tools for supporting brain health is surprisingly simple: movement. Physical activity increases blood flow to the brain. It supports the delivery of oxygen and nutrients. It also encourages the release of substances that help maintain healthy brain connections. You don't need extreme workouts. Many studies suggest regular walking can provide meaningful benefits. Even moderate activity performed consistently can support memory, attention, and mental clarity. The brain and body are deeply connected. When the body moves, the brain often benefits too. The importance of challenging your brain. The brain thrives on stimulation, learning new skills, reading, problem-solving, meaningful conversations, creative activities. These experiences encourage the brain to build and strengthen neural connections. One reason retirement can sometimes feel mentally challenging is that daily cognitive stimulation may suddenly decrease. The solution isn't constant productivity, it's engagement, giving the brain reasons to stay active and involved. Curiosity remains powerful at every age. Social connection protects the brain. Humans are social creatures, and the brain depends heavily on social interaction. Conversations challenge memory. They require attention, language retrieval, emotional processing, quick thinking. Isolation, on the other hand, can contribute to mental stagnation. Many adults notice sharper thinking after spending meaningful time with friends, family, or community groups. Social connection is not merely emotional support. It's also brain exercise, and its effects can be surprisingly significant. Small habits that support memory every day. You don't need complicated strategies. Small daily habits often have the greatest long-term impact. Stay physically active. Prioritize sleep. Manage stress where possible. Stay socially connected. Keep learning new things. Drink enough water. Eat a balanced diet. Give your brain periods of rest away from constant stimulation. Most importantly, avoid assuming every forgotten name is a sign of disaster, because fear itself can make memory retrieval harder. The more anxious you become about forgetting, the more likely you are to experience memory lapses. It's a cycle many people fall into without realizing it. Final thoughts. If you've noticed that names, words, and memories feel harder to recall after 50, you're certainly not alone. For many adults, these experiences are a normal part of how the brain changes with age. The information is often still there. It simply takes longer to access. Mental fatigue, poor sleep, stress, brain fog, lifestyle factors. All of these can influence memory far more than many people realize. And understanding that can be reassuring, because it reminds us that forgetfulness isn't always a sign that something is seriously wrong. Sometimes your brain is simply asking for better support, more rest, more movement, more balance. So the next time a name sits stubbornly on the tip of your tongue, remember this. A slower memory is not necessarily a failing memory, and growing older does not mean your brain has stopped working. Often it just means it's working differently than it used to. If you found this video helpful, consider subscribing to Vitality. Path 50 Plus for more practical insights on brain health, memory, healthy aging, and staying mentally sharp after 50. And remember, it's never too late to support the brain that supports you every day.
Before we conclude, a quick reminder. The information shared in this video is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this channel. Your health is your most valuable asset. Treat it with the professional care it deserves.